This video is about the English 1 Unit 2 project. Make sure you read the directions carefully. Not only do you want to read the directions on the assessment page, but you also want to look at the project rubrics, which will give you a more specific breakdown of what I look for when I grade your paper. Here's a highlight of the project requirements. Use an analogy to develop a thesis. Have a clear thesis, which may be a lesson or a message for the reader. Use one or more personal experiences to develop the thesis. Use a clear organizational pattern for the essay. Use writing strategies to develop a clear tone. The essay should be between 2 and 4 pages, which is just kind of a guideline for you. When I grade, I mostly look at the word count requirement, and that's between 500 and 1,000 words. Let's talk more about an analogy to develop a thesis. A lot of students struggle with how to include this, and they'll simply skip it. Please don't do that. That's the main purpose of the paper. Well, what is an analogy? An analogy is a comparison between two things, typically for the purpose of explanation or clarification. What is a thesis? It's a sentence that expresses the main idea of a research paper or essay. So let's refer to 2 of the readings from the unit for some inspiration. The first story we'll talk about is Living Well, Living Good. In this story, Auntie compared herself to the wealthy people she worked for. As they aged, they lost joy. However, Auntie and her friends were living a good life, and her employers actually asked if they could watch the group have fun. So your analogy here is Auntie to the people that she worked for, and the thesis from this is life seems to love the liver of it. And this was actually located towards the end of the story. So you don't have to put your thesis at the very beginning of your paper. That's traditionally where it gets placed. But if you think it makes more sense to put it at the end, you can put it there. You can also repeat it if you want to have it at both the beginning and the end. So whatever makes sense to you is fine. Whatever makes sense for your story. The next reading we'll talk about is Straw into Gold. In this story, the author was tasked with meal prep. And since she is Mexican, they assumed she could make tortillas. She never made them in her life, though. This is a quote from the story. Why did I feel like the woman in the fairy tale who was locked in a room in order to spin straw into gold? She also compares this to other challenging moments in her life. So her analogy is turning straw into gold to challenging times in her life. And her thesis, which kind of came from the end of the story as well, is along the way there has been straw for the taking. With a little imagination, it can be spun into gold. So now you're ready to brainstorm for your own paper. So first decide what you want to write about. Select one or more of your personal experiences. It can be a trip you took, a time you had to move, a relationship you had, a challenging moment, a happy time, a sad time in your life, or any other idea. That's just some suggestions for you to consider. But you want to pick an experience that you learned some sort of lesson from. And that was what you'll use to help develop your thesis. And then you need to find an appropriate analogy. So like straw into gold, you can use a fairy tale for inspiration. Maybe there's a famous quote that you want to use. Or like living well, living good, you can create your own analogy. So it's up to you. Lots of different options to consider. Just decide what you're writing about, what your lesson is, and then you decide what makes the most sense. Make sure you follow the writing process. So after brainstorming, which will probably take you some time, you're going to go ahead and draft your paper. Then revise it. Move the content around. Is your thesis in the right place? Is your paragraphs ordered right? Do you want to move them around? Then you'll edit, proofread for spelling, grammar. Make sure you also look at punctuation, capitalization, and you'll publish your work. So as stated in the directions, you need to be submitting your work as either a doc or PDF file. And that's it. Thank you.